Please put your hands together for Tim Logue from Thales Alenia Space.
Okay, well, thanks for staying with us here this morning, and I'm very pleased to welcome my old friend. In fact, I met him first here at, I think we were talking PTC 92, maybe 91, Andrew Jordan, excuse me, who is currently, he was appointed the Executive Director, President, and Chief Executive Officer of AsiaSat on November 1st, 2016. So he's completed now 15 months. He has over 27 years of experience in the satellite industry, though he started his career in 1984, perhaps a propitious year, in the computer software industry in Asia. He's acted as the general manager of marketing at AsiaSat when I met him between 91 and 94, or 93, excuse me, and he has, since then, he held executive positions with several satellite operators, including General Electric's GE Satellite Company, and more recently, he was in Paris, lucky dog, from 2013 to October of 2016 as Executive Vice President, Strategic Projects at Eutelsat, and was responsible for overseeing Eutelsat's business in Asia and for developing key strategic customer relationships globally. Interesting for this audience, he obtained his bachelor's degree in Chinese from London University's School of Oriental and African Studies in 1984. So he's been actively, I would say, living off of his degree since then. So please welcome Andrew Jordan. Thank you. Put that. I don't know where I can put that.
Anyway. You're going to hold it.
I'll hold it. Anyway, so welcome back to PTC, Andrew. I know you've been back here in different positions and different opportunities over the years, but it's great to have you back here now, kind of at I don't know what to say, the pinnacle of your career as CEO of AsiaSat, but certainly AsiaSat being one of the premier regional satellite operators in Asia Pacific. It's a great coming home for you, particularly from Paris. You're residing now in Hong Kong, I take it?
Yep, very happily so.
Okay, so back in Hong Kong, which has changed a great deal. It's probably almost unrecognizable.
No, not really. It's still the same exciting place that it was 25 years ago when I last lived there.
All right, very good. Well, since our time is, this is a quick session, let's get into it because it's a very exciting time for the Asian satellite operators and indeed in the satellite industry, and we want to bring our colleagues here up to speed, many of whom probably are not that familiar with the satellite industry, but so we'll frame some of these questions somewhat broadly, and then I know you'll fill it in based on your wide experience in this industry. Particularly, for example, most of the satellite operators' businesses as well as AsiaSats have traditionally been focused on the video business of video distribution of one sort or another. Is that changing and in what ways? Because that's happening in different regions at different paces.
Yeah, it is. Like a lot of operators, our revenue breakdown is about 70% video, 30% data. I think data is going to be a faster growing segment globally. And we, as you said, we've seen in more developed markets such as Europe and here in the US that video it is flat or even potentially declining via satellite. That's not happening in Asia because the infrastructure doesn't support the kind of wholesale move or not wholesale, but the move that we're seeing in some more developed markets to streaming type services. So we see video being a strong component of our business, for the next generation in Asia. But as I said, data will grow, and the reason it will grow is mobility, in-flight connectivity, maritime services, and bridging the digital divide with rural broadband and those kind of applications.
I mean, I think one of the things which we should note real quickly is the fact that AsiaSat has traditionally covered a very broad region or part of Asia and into the Middle East, as I recall, and 50-some countries or more. probably more these days, which also covers, even despite the achievements of many in this audience and the operators in the region, it's still a patchy development of the terrestrial infrastructure.
Yeah, that's right. I think at last count we cover 54 countries.
Okay.
And we're extremely active in not all 54 countries, but probably about a dozen of those are our key markets. And you're absolutely right. You've got infrastructure differences, from Japan and Korea, which has extensive fiber. Some city-states like Singapore, the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of China. But then you've got, large parts of rural China, for example, India, Southeast Asia, which don't have the terrestrial infrastructure, and therefore satellites are not only ideal, but they're a really important communications infrastructure.
Okay, terrific. So we understand your comment about, in fact, things aren't changing that quickly for you, particularly in the video distribution business, because that terrestrial infrastructure isn't into all of those corners of Asia now.
Exactly right. Satellite is by far the most cost-effective way to get a video signal in the large territories of Asia. Okay,
terrific. So now again, looking globally and then bringing it in locally or regionally, if we would say, it says there's a global trend among satellite operators towards, trying to enhance their internet distribution and connectivity businesses, and that's been tried in a variety of ways. We've seen certainly the growth in North America and some in Europe of what we call high throughput satellites, really geared towards internet direct to the home or direct to businesses. How do you see that playing out in Asia, which kind of has had a very different story in that area?
We're at a very interesting juncture in Asia. HTS is quite a disruptive technology. There's a wide perception amongst customers that HTS is available today in Asia, which is not the case, and that's leading to pricing pressure for data type services. But we've looked at our customer lineup, and we found that actually present technology, most of them will not benefit from HTS. So if you have a wide beam broadcast VSAT type network, it's going to be more cost effective to stay on present wide beam FSS technology. That said, I'm a great believer that HTS is the future of mobility, of connectivity, and the more we can do to get the cost per bit down, the closer we get to fiber-like services at fiber-like pricing, is going to lead to very strong development in our industry. There are very few, as I mentioned, HTS systems in Asia, aside from Intelsat, and I guess you could consider Thaicom's IP-Star kind of HTS. We are in fairly advanced planning for our own HTS system. We issued an RFP late last year, and we're going through the responses for that.
Okay, so you would anticipate if the business case comes together and all of that you'd be signing a contract this year and probably launching when then, about 2021?
I prefer not to make such forward-looking statements before my board has actually approved anything.
Okay, fair enough. I don't want to put you on the spot, particularly in such a public forum. I guess also related to that, another kind of disruptive force that the satellite industry is seeing, regional and global operators, is actually the and we've seen a lot of this at PTC over the years, the introduction, not yet launched in many cases, but of non-geostationary satellites. The satellite industry has traditionally relied on geostationary satellites and what we like to call the Clarke Orbit in some corners of the industry. But now there's a lot of suggestions, OneWeb, and of course we've seen O3B quite often here doing good work in the region. How do you see that playing out? Is that a complementary service from a market service delivery standpoint, or is it? Are you more concerned about the potential for technical interference? Because sometimes we're sharing frequencies for these systems. What's your view of it from on high in Hong Kong?
I don't see it as a competitive threat. I think it is complementary. We're not going to see the huge numbers of constellations that have been announced. I think you'll see a maximum of 1.5, maybe 2. I think that there are some technical concerns, but I believe those will be sorted out. But if you look at the actual throughput of these systems, and it's just over a terabyte, when you consider that human beings occupy 5% of the world's surface, so 95% of that 1 terabyte is actually going where nobody is. And companies like Viasat are building Viasat 3, which is announced as having a terabyte of capacity. They can significantly outperform LEOs. In my perhaps slightly controversial opinion, I think two groups of people are going to make money out of LEOs: the manufacturers and the people that buy them from the bankrupt first owners.
Which sort of follows the model we saw, not necessarily for high throughput satellites, but for new technologies back in the late 90s and early 2000s.
I think one of the benefits of LEO development, it's causing a lot of interest in space, which is good. And I think we will, in the long term, benefit from some of the innovation that's being brought to that part of the market.
Do you see, I mean, going back to your one comment about the services that you already provide to rural and unconnected parts of Asia, China, I imagine, and India particularly, those markets, do you see a renewed interest in doing that because of the market focus of particularly OneWeb and some of the others is at those kind of village markets, if you will? I mean, do you see a renewed interest by governments or others that would want to say, let's re-look at that market?
No, I think the interest has always been there, but with the technology we've had until this inflection point of HTS, it's just not been very cost effective to provide those services. And unless you've got some sort of very strong universal service obligation, it's not been happening. But I think now with HTS and the price per bit coming down so dramatically with that new technology, I think that's what's driving it, not LEOs and MEOs.
Okay. Do you see, particularly to reaching those markets, there's also related to that a lot of interest in the ground infrastructure and electronically steered flat panel antennas that you just kind of put up and point at the sky, and they'll track these non-geostationary satellites, but obviously they can lock in on a geo as well. Do you see that as potentially having a big impact on that market, that rural market?
I think it will help if the pricing is right. If these devices are very expensive, we're talking about fairly cheap systems, a dish, a router, and local Wi-Fi.
Right.
So I'm not sure that you need state-of-the-art antenna technology for that.
Okay, fair enough. The other question is, of course, we talked earlier about the development of terrestrial services, and certainly mobile backhaul has been a significant development in some corners of Asia and elsewhere in the world. Has that been a significant part of your market as well on the VSAT side? Or?
Yeah, we do quite a substantial amount of cellular backhaul, linking archipelago-type islands and that sort of thing.
Do you then, so that leads me to the next question, which is the next generation, which is 5G, which I'm learning at this conference is many things and potentially many things to many people. But it's being seen in some corners of the satellite industry, and there's been some discussions yesterday particularly, as to whether is 5G more of a threat because it potentially could take away frequencies in the C-band, which you use quite a bit on AsiaSat, which is, you can explain the advantages of that, or is it more of an opportunity to see more backhaul requirements from these high throughput terrestrial systems? I
think it's both. In terms of the opportunity, yes, we will be critical to backhaul those services. In terms of the frequency, you're quite right that the LTE industry has been after the C-band for a very long time. And we don't really understand why 5G is looking at it, because you need, for 5G to work, you need cell sites that are 1 to 150 meters apart, and C-band doesn't have enough frequency for 5G. 5G is about very large amounts of data, and the C-band will not support that.
Because, well, as you said, it's only 500 megahertz, right?
And the reason C-band is so important to us in Asia, and the same would apply to Africa and parts of Latin America is, we live in some of the heaviest rainfall areas in the world, and C-band, because of wave propagation, is significantly more robust than the higher frequency Ka or Ku bands, and is used for lifeline services, air traffic control, bank ATM systems, convenience stores, gas stations.
Okay, so it's critical, you would say, for the satellite industry to protect and maintain access to those C-band frequencies?
Yes, it is. Absolutely critical.
Okay. So, so are you particularly, I'm curious, as a follow-up question, do you see AsiaSat playing a significant role directly or through industry groups leading up to WRC-19?
I think both. We're involved in all of the industry groups that are looking at this, and my team is busily writing a white paper on this topic as we speak. Okay,
great. So, assuming that you get to maintain your C-band or access to other frequencies that allows AsiaSat to grow, where do you see is the next, in the next 3 to 5 years, the growth opportunities for the satellite industry and for AsiaSat in the region?
Well, as I said, the video business is a core part of what we do, and that's actually growing. It's not spectacular growth, but it is growing, and you'll see a lot of comment in online and in the press that linear TV is, if not dead, is dying. Nothing could be further from the truth. The average American in 2015 watched 4 hours 36 minutes of television, and in 2016 they watched 4 hours 32 minutes. So the decline was 1.5 ad breaks.
Right.
So linear TV is doing quite well, and we're also seeing that the OTT and streaming type players are now talking about stitching together genre-based content, which sounds very
much like linear TV
because of their churn rates are so high. So that business will continue to grow. There are still some DTH opportunities in Asia, but where I think the big growth is going to come is in-flight connectivity. People want to be connected. I'm personally a little bit ambivalent about it because I like getting on a plane and nobody can bother me and I can goof off and get away with it. But professionally, I'm delighted that's a growth market. Maritime is very important. Crew welfare, they can contact home and with affordable bandwidth, and also the ships can be turned into the back office. They've been given some back office process functions, and with updated weather data, they can shave significant amount of time and therefore save fuel time off their voyages. I also see rural broadband as a big driver, and with high throughput, low cost capacity, those services can be provided, and people don't have to pay a lot of money to get access to the internet.
Mm-hmm. Great. Do you see, particularly in Asia, there's a couple of things that they're kind of the hot topics. We were talking about meeting up in Washington in a couple months in the big satellite industry session, and I'm sure in-flight entertainment and mobility, as you just touched on, will be big issues. Do you see other aspects like the Internet of Things and the aggregation of that traffic as an opportunity in parts of Asia at least, or you don't see it coming on quite as quickly?
I think it is an opportunity, but our focus is on mobility.
Okay. All right. Very good.
There's a lot of talk about connected cars. I'm not sure I completely buy into that. Satellite is the best way to do connected cars.
Okay. Very good. So, and another question that has always seemed to, in the satellite industry in the region, we saw an explosion in the 90s of lots of different regional satellite companies and national satellite companies launching. We've seen a little bit, and that brings the flip side of the coin of saying, well, there's too many of them. We need to see some consolidation, and we really haven't seen that much of that. So I don't know what your view is of whether if we come back in 5 years, will we see the same number, is it 30 or whatever the number is, of regional and national satellite systems over Asia? Are we likely to see the same number of players, or will some of them consolidate, or some of them simply not replenish their satellites?
I think a combination. I don't. The Asian market, as you rightly say, has been ripe for consolidation for a long time. People have been talking about it for 15 years or more. It's never happened, and the reasons are not economic; they're primarily political. You know, a small country that has its flag in space and is very proud of that isn't particularly keen on having discussions to sell that to another operator. And also expectations on valuations are typically very high. So we've seen some attempts. You know, a few years ago, Telkom in Indonesia tried to do a sort of sale, but that involved whoever was interested putting their orbital slots under Indonesia. So that was a little bit of a non-starter. So I think we will continue to see a lot of different satellite companies. However, how many of those will get into HTS? I think a very small number of them.
So you would see the continued kind of niche marketing of all these different systems, both on a geographic as well as probably service basis.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. In fact, we're out of time, but thank you for your attention, and thank you, Andrew, for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at future PTCs.
It's wonderful to be back here. Thank you, Tim.
All right. Thank you, Andrew.